Alright my friends, welcome back. It is time for another reaction video to a Motorweek Retro review. I absolutely love doing these, and since I did one for the General Motors 86 model year, their full lineup, I thought it would be fun to do the 86 Ford models video. Now, there's a lot on Motorweek to go get through. I think it's fascinating how many options they have of these older cars, but this one I thought it'd be kind of fair. Let's look at 86 to 86, and also I believe this would be the episode that shows the new Taurus and the new Sable, so it'd be kind of fun to go through. So let's jump in.
For Motorweek, John Davis.
Hello and welcome to Motorweek and to part one of our 1986 Detroit New Car Preview. This is a very special time for automakers since it's also the 100th anniversary of the horseless carriage. So along with our annual review, Pat Goss will be looking back at how the car and some of its workings have evolved. Our review focuses on Ford and Chrysler this time, with General Motors and American Motors to follow. And follow is what the entire U.S. auto industry did in 1908 when Henry Ford took a gamble on the Model T and revolutionized personal transportation. Ford's Tin Lizzie, like this one provided by our friend Loy Zimmerman, was really responsible for starting America's love affair with the car. So it's fitting for Ford to start the centennial year of the car by betting big bucks on yet another trend-setting project.
That is a beautiful vehicle. What gorgeous shape it's in. I've had a chance to ride in a Model T. I've never driven one. I don't even understand the controls, but I had a chance to drive in one. Gosh, I don't remember how many years ago, and it was funny in a way that was terrifying. It's a car. It moved under its own power like a car. I mean, you could see the origins of the car, but it felt like a collection of parts that were just kind of loosely held together and rolling down the road. So it was interesting. It was really interesting. Didn't feel anything like a modern car would. It felt more like a buggy that was moving under its own power. It was cool. It was cool, but terrifying.
The $3 billion gamble in question is the Aero-styled Ford Taurus and its kin, the Mercury Sable. Dollar-wise, the biggest single gamble in the history of Ford. Besides radical sheet metal that has more than a passing resemblance to the Audi 5000S,
I remember that criticism when it was new, that it looked a little bit like the Audi, but it is smoother than the Audi. I didn't realize this was the biggest investment they'd made in a new car up to that point. I probably knew that at one point, but I don't remember that now. And it's funny that hindsight being 2020, knowing what we know, they called this a gamble, and we all know it paid off very, very well for Ford.
These front-wheel drive mid-size Fords are new in every way. With a length just short of 16 feet and a wheelbase of 106 inches, the exterior dimensions are just slightly larger than Audi's flagship. Most everything about the cars shows the influence of Ford's European trained bosses. But to be fair, the Taurus Sable design was set in stone long before the latest big Audi was introduced. The Sable, with all the aero touches, including a grille-less light bar nose and flush side glass, has a drag coefficient of only 0.32. The striking wagon counterpart only 0.34, and that's the lowest of any wagon sold in the U.S. Power initially will come from an all-new port-injected 60-degree 3-liter V6 and 4-speed overdrive automatic combination. Transversely mounted, power ratings are 140 horses and 160 pound-feet of torque. Combined with the aerodynamics,
140 horsepower from a V6. I mean, again, I've mentioned it on videos before. Thank gosh for progress, right? My 4-cylinder makes more than that. But what a gamble by Ford! All new body, all new styling, revolutionary styling, new engine, 4-speed transmission, General Motors, and you know, GM was caught flat-footed. I believe I mentioned in another video that GM was working on their mid-size platforms and sent everything back to the drawing board when Ford came out with this, because their stuff just looked so dowdy compared to it.
This powertrain should provide everyday mileage in the low 20s, and that's good for cars weighing 3,200 pounds or more. Not ready for startup production is a 92-horse, 2.5-liter throttle body injected four-cylinder. This bored-out variant of the Tempo Topaz power plant will be available with a Mazda-made 5-speed manual transaxle or Ford's 3-speed automatic. But what really makes...
so remember that. Ford used to sell a mid-sized car with a 4-cylinder with a 5-speed. How long ago were those days, right? I mean, yeah, you could... Well, actually, no, you can't get an Accord with a 5-speed now. They've done away with it, right? So I imagine not many people pick the 4-cylinder 5-speed option in the Taurus.
The Ford Taurus Mercury Sable so revolutionary are the un-Ford-like touches. The interiors are very contemporary. Even the standard bench seat Taurus looks purposeful. The dash and instrument cluster of the Taurus has little bright work, with all controls shaped for rapid use. Air handling controls are European in style, using rotary knobs rather than levers. A similar arrangement is used on the Sable, and digital instrumentation is an option. The Taurus Sable will also be the first cars to use the InstaClear electrically heated windshield for engine-off defrost. Outside, the details continue, from the Aero headlights that are fast becoming a new Ford trademark to the door handles that are designed to go with the body's flow. And how's this for a neat item? Optional on both Taurus and Sable wagons is a rear-facing jump seat.
I did not know that. Oh my goodness. I've talked before about my family had a 78 or 79 Oldsmobile Custom Supreme, I believe it was what it was called. Big, stupid, heavy station wagon with a monstrous engine. It was like a 6.6 liter engine or something stupid like that, but it had this rear-facing bench seat with ashtray. I have no recollection that they offered this as an option on the Fords. And I'd like to just say there with the interiors, it's funny that Ford was leaping forward and they were using what they call the European design, rotary knobs for the HVAC, but still, boy, even in '86, you could see it was hard to let go of some of the design history that cars had at that time. You notice the radio was down real low. How hard would it have been to have moved it up here right underneath it, more like a pod, like we would have seen. And then the bench seat, that just kills me. A modern car, it still had bench seats. I think the Sable had the optional bucket seats. But, you know, those still sold well, and people still had families with 6 people, and they all like to go on vacation with each other for some reason. So I imagine it sold pretty well, but it's kind of funny to look back at it now. I mean, go point to a car right now that's got a bench seat up front like that.
That transforms into an underfloor storage nook and a fold-out picnic tray. The front suspension on all models and the rear on the sedan is McPherson strut with gas shock standard all round. Wagons use their own tube shock coil spring rear suspension that allows both a smooth ride and a wide flat cargo floor. Now prices should range from just under $10,000 for the base Taurus L to $15,000 for the top-line Sable LS. That's on par with its major domestic competitors and less than its import rivals. And that should help Ford capture a major chunk of the midsize family car market. Ford Taurus and Mercury Sable, a slippery approach for the most interesting American sedans introduced in many years, and they're certain to do much more than just slip through the wind. But despite their come-hither looks, the Ford Taurus and Mercury Sable are only a part of Ford's plan to lure buyers into an affair with their 1986 cars.
That's a rather risque way to put it. Oh, wow.
Ford's other front drive offerings have received some notable revisions and additions for 1986, beginning with the compact Ford Escort and Mercury Lynx. The Escort Lynx donned new front and rear sheet metal and a larger 1.9-liter engine just last spring as 85.5 models.
So I just want to say, my girlfriend in college had a Mercury Lynx. I don't think I've talked about it on this channel. It was red, and I think it had red interior too. I have no idea what engine it had in it, but man, that thing was a piece of junk. It was slow as all get out, and the Escort is famous. The Escort was popular. The Escort is famous in Europe and was one of the best sellers. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. It felt big and heavy and slow, and everything about it just felt like a bigger car, except for the dimensions. But I will tell you what, that thing, I don't understand how it kept rolling, honestly. I don't know how many miles that car had on it, but I remember opening the hood of it one time, and there were just wires, like broken wires under there. And I was like, I literally don't understand how this car runs, but it continued to run and it continued to start. I don't remember what happened to it. Just one day it wouldn't go anymore. So, good car. I mean, not exciting, not cutting edge, not fun, I don't think. It must have had either had a base engine or maybe it had this 1.9 in it. I mean, it had no real excitement to it at all. But in terms of a car that you don't care how it looked because it kept running, that car.
Now high-performance variants are back as the re-engineered Escort GT and Lynx XR3. Both sport a high-output, port-injected motor that produces 26% more horsepower and 14% more torque than the standard engine. There will be no turbocharged version. With big 15-inch wheels, a new rear stabilizer bar, and thicker one up front, they're outstanding econo-boxes and corners. The flush headlights of the standard Escort Lynx have been augmented on the GT XR3 with an offset grille, a popular Italian touch these days. They have spoilers front and rear, wheel spats, and driver-oriented interior trim. And in case you were wondering about the bug-eyed EXP, a more handsome model will debut next spring.
I think that's unfair. I always thought the EXP was kind of cool looking. I don't like the offset grille. That's just truly, truly hideous. But the interior, when they're new, that interior looked pretty good. I don't know. I have trouble thinking that of some of the other small cars that were out there that the Escort would be what I wanted unless I was just a diehard Ford fan.
Notch, the Ford Tempo and Mercury Topaz also get smoothing touches for their aero shapes. Flush lights and new grills give these mid-size offerings a cleaner, longer look. The Sport Package, introduced late last year, has been enhanced with 15-inch cast wheels and stiffer springs. Interiors on all models remain mostly the same, although there is a new steering wheel and...
Now, I think that looks really sharp and very contemporary. I mean, again, it looks like everything's mounted real low right there. I can't quite tell if that's maybe a drink holder or something like that, but the shape of the dashboard and the instrument area, very handsome car. Handsome. I wouldn't say it's earth-shattering, but I think that's very, very handsome. You know, Ford steering wheel, it was handsome for the time. These were not good cars. They really weren't. I liked them. I thought they were pretty comfortable. I remember, I believe it was Car and Driver, they were testing one, and I remember they were saying that if you think that auto reviewers get only the cream puffs that are hand-picked, you know, to impress auto reviewers, the one they got had the two seats didn't match. Like one was from the sport trim and one was from the base trim, something like that. So Ford wasn't perfect at the time. I kind of like these cars because they are a little boring, and I like boring cars like this, but not a great car. I've never heard a lot of good things about them and how much they really, really held up. Oh boy, lightning strike me. I actually think some of the GM stuff was better in terms of reliability at the time.
And column design that provides more crash protection than before. The long-rumored four-wheel drive Tempo Topaz is slated to bow at mid-year. Over on the rear-wheel drive side of the track, changes for 1986 have been even more subtle. The original pony car, the Ford Mustang, meets the new year with few changes outside, except for the new high-mounted stoplight, being spoiler-mounted on all hatchback models. The spring revisions of the sophisticated Mustang SVO are being followed in the Blood and Guts GT with sequential port fuel injection for its 5-liter V8. While a beautiful sight under hood, the reasons for the change have more to do with fuel economy than speed.
Yeah, so my mom had an '86 Mustang, and it was red. I think it had a red interior. I tell you what, it was a cool car. I'm not a muscle car guy, but that was a cool car to drive, and absolutely reliable. That car had 2 problems in its entire life. One was one of the computers went bad that measured the outside air going in, and I think it had a carburetor. Anyway, it was a computer that measured the outside air and what was going on, so the car didn't want to run very well. And then a bolt on the alternator had backed itself out over 100-some-odd thousand miles, and one day just fell. So all of a sudden you're draining the battery, you don't have any power, and it's because a bolt came out. That was it. That was all that ever went wrong with that car. So say what you will about American manufacturers in the 80s. They made some horrible cars that were real lemons. But the Mustang, it ranks right up there with one of the most reliable cars I've ever had a family member own, honestly, in red. And I'll never forget, about this time, I think it was the 86, you've got the LX, and you could get that with the V8, and then you had the GT, and the LX was faster. Now, the GT had better suspension. I think it had bigger tires, so it handled better. It was more of a performance setup, but in a straight line, the LX was faster because it didn't have the body cladding and the friction from those tires, I believe. If I'm wrong, please forgive me, but let me know in the comments. And so the LX was actually slightly faster than the GT in a straight line.
The high-output 5 liters 200 horsepower is 5% less than last year, although low-end torque is up 7.5% to 285. The Mustang's close relation, the bubble-backed Mercury Capri, also gets the revised V8. Now, the car that began Ford's Aero Wave, the Thunderbird, also goes into 86 with almost no changes inside or out.
Okay, so same note I said on the GM1, this 2-door, large personal luxury transport. I'm glad it went away. These are ridiculous. Now, don't misunderstand me. I like this car. I had a 2-door Buick Regal, and the Thunderbird would have been my choice if I had one at the time. But now looking back, small cabin, big nose, big overhang at the back, totally ridiculous car, way waste of space and materials and gas and everything else. But I'm just going to tell you, I've always kind of liked these. This is not my favorite body style, but I've always kind of liked the T-Bird.
The Fila Designer series has been discontinued, and slightly larger tires are now standard. A 150-horse 5-liter port-injected V8 is offered here, and the 2.3-liter...
Did they just say 150 horses? From a V8? The 3-liter V6 in the Taurus made, what, 140, didn't they say? So this, what weak engines, Thank goodness we help smog, don't get me wrong. Hey, thank goodness we're hugging Mother Earth. But really, EPA, you strangled generations of cars by putting a noose around their exhaust. This is an example of the EPA setting standards that the technology could not match. I don't know exactly why this car does not make more horsepower than that, but I imagine that it was a luxurious acceleration.
Turbo T-Bird continues. That lightweight powertrain, complete with 5-speed, is also available over at Mercury on the Cougar XR7. A power moonroof will be added later in the model year, and for the first time, a 4-speed automatic is available with a standard 3.8-liter V6. Despite the advent of the slick front-drive Ford Taurus and Mercury Sable, the rear-drive Ford LTD and Mercury Marquis sedan and wagon will be continued for the first few months of the 1986 model year. But the story is quite different for Ford's biggest rear-drive family cars, the LTD Crown Victoria and sister Mercury Grand Marquis. With a renewed interest in larger cars, popularity of these full-size V8 sedans and wagons has grown. They now should be around for the rest of...
Look at that ridiculous overhang on the rear. I mean, you could put a whole Dodge Colt back there. The proportions are, just... You know, I respect these, and again, this reminds me a lot of that Oldsmobile station wagon I was talking about. But man, this is, you look at the Taurus, and you look even at the Topaz and the Tempo, and then you look at this, and you can tell this is another era of design just being held over and held over. I mean, what is that up front? 2 feet from the front wheel well to the bumper. I mean, just acres of space up there, and then I don't even know, 3.5 feet maybe to the rear tail lights from the rear wheel wells. Just what ridiculous proportions.
Of the decade, with new sheet metal due along the way. As for Ford's luxury models, again, 1986 is mostly a carryover year for the Lincoln Mark. The Lincoln Town Car, with a fresh reskinning last year, continues to be their most popular model. Changes for 1986 are limited to the new 5-liter V8, now with roller tappets and fast-burn combustion chambers. Ford's answer to the GM Delco Bose radio is a Ford JBL unit, and it's due later in the model year. Lincoln's downsized sedan, the Continental, adds last year's limited availability anti-lock brake system as standard on all models. The 12-speaker JBL stereo will also be offered here, along with a host of minor interior changes to fabric.
So just like I said on that GM one, what was the deal with red interiors? And not just as an accent, right? Not to accentuate something. Red steering wheel, red column, red dashboard, red carpet, red seats. But those seats look comfortable. I'm going to tell you that right now. And then you can't really see the gauges here, but you just know it's got one of those long rectangular ones where the needle sweeps like that, tops out about 85 miles an hour. I admit, you know, these old town cars were cool. If you wanted luxury, quiet, soothing ride, man, the town car was hard to beat. It was good for that. But well, let's just say that interior design has come a long way.
And trim. Everything that goes for the 4-door Continental also goes for the Mark 7 Coupe, including the demise of the turbo diesel option, a fine engine that just showed up too late and sold too few.
Had too little power.
The Luxo Touring Mark 7 LSC gets the same high-output V8 as the Mustang and Capri, along with a revised suspension and a new mechanical gauge cluster. The delayed Lincoln Mercury import, the Mercury XR4 Ti, will finally come up to full speed in 1986. The only change, that ubiquitous high-mounted taillight.
This car right here, this car deserves its own video. I'll look and see if they have one, actually. That would be fun to do. This car had the potential to be a home run. And this car is one of the ones I think of when I have endlessly people saying, well, they make such good cars in Europe. Why don't they just bring them over to America? Well, this is why. Because almost every time they have, GM, Ford, or Chrysler, it's failed. Okay? And this is a great example. Based on the Sierra, if I remember correctly, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but over in Europe, this could have been an excellent handling car. But I think a couple of things killed it. First off, the styling. Whoever designed it must have been doing it by touch. I don't know. The headlights are not exactly aero because they're sunk back in. the back is so busy with a cut and a window and a cut and a window and then 2 spoilers, and it's just ends up ugly. And then why did they do it? Were they really going to try to turn Mercury into its own brand when they were still trying to support Lincoln and Mercury? Or why were they bringing this in when they had the Topaz and the LTD and the Taurus all in there at the same time? Why introduce another sedan that fits in the middle of all that? It's that poor product planning that drove me nuts in the 80s for some of the decisions that the domestic manufacturers made, of thinking more is more when you've got, over at Honda, here's your 2 choices, which one do you want?
A second and larger imported Mercury model is due next spring. But if you think that aerodynamics are only a concern with Ford cars, just take a look at the latest in Ford trucks, most notably the shape of the Ford Aerostar van and wagon. As the last of the first round of domestic minivans to appear, the Aerostar provides something for those who want smaller vans and bigger station wagons. With seating for up to 7, the Aerostar is powered by a 2.3-liter 4 or 2.8-liter V6. The rear-drive Aerostar has a maximum towing capacity of 5,000 pounds.
Okay, before we move on, I'm just going to say, terrible, terrible minivan. It might be good, it might be reliable, okay? I'm not going to say it's not. I don't have any evidence to say that it's not. And 5,000 pounds towing, hey, that's better than the new Maverick they just introduced. But that was Ford being caught completely unaware by the Chrysler minivans. Front-wheel drive, car-based, good handling, and a feeling of lightness and space. So what did they do? They slapped this together, made it aero, and then pushed it out to people. I've met many people who've had them. They've always had good service out of them, I admit, but this is more trucky. It's truckish. It's not competitive. It was just something to give to the Ford loyalists to keep them out of a Chrysler. But it was a miserable, miserable attempt. Really, really dislike it. If you own a painting company, it probably was great for you. But for a family, it was a miserable attempt.
Other news at Ford Trucks is the addition of an extended cab to their downsized Ranger pickups.
Okay, so I hate to interrupt again so quickly, but let me just say, heck yes. I talk a lot about smaller trucks and lamenting the loss of the smaller trucks, and this is what we want right here. Who's with me? This is, they added an extended cab. That's nice, okay? But this is what we're looking for right here. I wonder if they'll mention the price.
Called Super Cab and includes 17 inches of behind-the-seat space with inward-facing jump seats an option. V6 power has been improved with a longer-stroke port-injected 2.9-liter unit, replacing last year's carbureted 2.8-liter. The Super Cab can be ordered as 4-wheel drive with Ford's new Touch Drive electronic shift system. It's a soft-touch way to go from 2- to 4-wheel drive without stopping. Both the larger engine and touch drive are also available on the Bronco 2. Sophistication in trucks, vans, cars, across the board seems to be the Ford Motor Company's story for 1986 and beyond.
So that's it. They don't say anything about the rest of the truck line. I'm surprised. Were there no changes to the F-150 and 250? That again, like the one they did for GM, they left stuff out. But man, who would love to go back to 1986 with some cash and pick up, a Ranger, go pick up a Bronco 2? That would be awesome, and maybe pick up a Taurus, honestly, and maybe I don't know. Actually, you know what? I'd pick up an Escort. I like the smaller cars better. None of them are classics. But man, it would be cool to have a brand spanking new one, especially when you can buy these things for you know, $9,000. So that was a cool trip down memory lane for me, guys. I hope it was for you too. Do you own any of these cars? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. Ford had a little bit of swagger back in '86. Some of their stuff was old, and they hadn't gotten to it yet, and some of the changes they made didn't really work out. The Thunderbird, I actually think, improved. The Continental, maybe the Town Car definitely got better looking. The Topaz was replaced with the Contour, which had its own problems, but overall, Ford was kind of on a roll at this time. They didn't keep it up. They lost some ground eventually, but it's reminiscent of right now. They've got some swagger going on. So I'd love to hear any memories you've got of these cars, but I appreciate you taking a few minutes and spending it with me today.